The moment Ethan Blackwell made that bet, his entire life began to fall apart. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the rooftop casino high above Manhattan, turning the city lights below into blurred rivers of gold and silver. Inside, laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers while billionaires in tailored tuxedos tossed poker chips across velvet tables like they meant nothing. Ethan Blackwell sat at the center of it all, cold gray eyes fixed on the cards in his hands, looking less like a man and more like someone carved from stone. At 34, he owned half the skyline outside those windows, yet nothing in the room seemed capable of touching him. Not the expensive whiskey, not the women watching him from across the room, not even the applause after he won another six-figure hand. "You ever think about falling in love?" his friend Mason Reed asked with a grin, leaning back in his chair. Ethan didn't even look up. "Love is expensive." The table burst into laughter. Another man slid a silver poker chip across the table toward Ethan. "That's because you've never risked anything real." Ethan finally lifted his eyes. "Calm, sharp, dangerous. I built Blackwell Capital from nothing. I risk real things every day. Money isn't real to you anymore." Mason shot back. "Try risking your heart for once." Ethan gave a dry laugh and took a sip of whiskey. "People don't fall in love. They fall in love with what you can give them." "You really believe that?" "I know that." The rain outside intensified, rattling against the glass rooftop. Mason smirked and pointed toward a group of women near the bar. "Fine. Then prove it. 1 month. Pick any woman in this city and make her fall for you." The men around the table chuckled, expecting Ethan to brush it off like everything else. Instead, he slowly picked up the silver poker chip between 2 fingers. 1 month, he asked. 30 days, Mason replied. Ethan's expression never changed. "Easy." The table exploded with cheers. Mason laughed and raised his drink. "And what happens if you lose?" Ethan slipped the silver chip into his pocket. "I don't lose." At that exact moment, the rooftop doors burst open as a cold gust of wind swept rainwater across the marble floor. Claire Bennett hurried inside, carrying a soaked cardboard box filled with books pressed tightly against her chest. Her red scarf clung to her damp coat, while strands of blonde hair stuck to her cheeks. She looked completely out of place among the diamonds and designer suits. Nervous blue eyes scanned the crowded party. "Excuse me," she murmured softly while weaving through guests. "Delivery for Mr. Ashford." Nobody paid attention to her until the heel of her boot hit a slick patch of rainwater near the staircase. Everything happened in seconds. The box slipped from her hands. Books scattered across the floor. Claire lost her balance with a startled gasp just as Ethan turned toward the commotion. She fell directly into his arms. The room froze. Camera flashes exploded instantly from the paparazzi near the entrance. Ethan caught her against his chest before she hit the ground. One arm wrapped around her waist while her trembling hands grabbed the front of his tuxedo. For the first time that night, Ethan Blackwell looked genuinely stunned. Claire's heart pounded as she stared up into the coldest eyes she had ever seen. Then someone shouted from across the room. "Looks like the billionaire finally found his girl." And somewhere behind the crowd, Mason's grin slowly disappeared. By sunrise, Claire Bennett had become the internet's favorite joke. Her face was everywhere. On celebrity blogs, gossip accounts, morning talk shows. One blurry photo showed her tangled in Ethan Blackwell's arms beneath the casino lights, while another zoomed in on his hand around her waist. The headlines were brutal. "Mystery blonde captures billionaire bachelor." "Another gold digger hits Manhattan." "Who is Ethan Blackwell's new girl?" Claire stared at her cracked phone screen inside the tiny back office of Maple Lane Books, her stomach twisting harder with every headline. "This is insane," she whispered. Outside the office window, snow flurries drifted past old brick buildings while customers pretended not to stare at her through the store aisles. Even the owner, Mr. Calloway, kept giving her uncomfortable looks. Claire rubbed her tired eyes and pulled her red scarf tighter around her shoulders. She had barely slept 3 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those camera flashes exploding around her and Ethan Blackwell staring down at her like she was some unexpected problem dropped into his perfectly controlled world. The bell above the bookstore door rang sharply. Silence spread through the shop. 2 teenage girls walked in holding phones. One immediately whispered, "Oh my God, it is her." Claire's cheeks burned. She quickly grabbed a stack of books and disappeared deeper into the shelves. By noon, the whispers had become unbearable. Customers snapped secret pictures. Someone laughed near the register. Then came the worst part. Mr. Calloway slowly approached her holding his tablet. "Claire," he said carefully, "I know none of this is your fault, but the landlord already called asking questions." Her heart sank. "What? They think reporters are going to start showing up here." He sighed heavily. Business is struggling enough already. Claire swallowed hard. Maple Lane Books had been her safe place since she was 16 years old. The narrow aisle smelled like old paper and cinnamon candles. Every paycheck she earned helped keep the store alive after her father passed away. "You are not firing me, right?" she asked quietly. Mr. Calloway looked away, which was answer enough. An hour later, Claire stepped out into the freezing Manhattan afternoon carrying a cardboard box filled with her belongings. Snow crunched beneath her boots while taxis splashed dirty slush onto the sidewalk. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry. "Miss Bennett." The deep voice stopped her instantly. A sleek black Escalade sat parked beside the curb. Beside it stood Ethan Blackwell in a charcoal wool coat, looking completely untouched by the freezing wind around him. People on the sidewalk slowed down immediately, recognizing him. Claire tightened her grip on the box. "You have got to be kidding me." Ethan glanced briefly at the box in her arms. "You lost your job." "And whose fault is that?" she snapped. His jaw tightened slightly. For a second, he almost looked uncomfortable. Then he reached inside his coat and pulled out a thick white envelope. "Take it." Claire stared at him. "Excuse me. There is enough in there to cover several months of salary." His voice remained calm, controlled. "Consider it compensation for the inconvenience." Claire slowly looked down at the envelope, then back at him. Around them, strangers openly watched the scene unfold. She could practically hear what they were thinking. Gold digger. Jackpot. Lucky girl. Something inside her cracked. Without warning, Claire shoved the envelope hard against Ethan's chest. "I am not for sale." Ethan froze. The wind whipped snow between them, while the envelope slipped from his hand and landed in the slush at his polished shoes. Claire's breathing trembled. You do not get to throw money at people and pretend you fixed everything. For the first time in years, Ethan Blackwell had absolutely no response. Claire spent the next 2 days pretending her life was not collapsing. She applied for jobs at coffee shops, art stores, even grocery markets downtown. But every interview ended the same way. Someone recognized her. Someone whispered. Someone searched her name online. By Thursday night, the cold reality settled heavily in her chest. She had only $400 left in her checking account, overdue utility bills sitting unopened on the tiny kitchen table of her apartment. Outside her window, snow drifted through the narrow Brooklyn street while the radiator clicked weakly beside her. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by children's book sketches spread across old notebooks. Tiny watercolor drawings of foxes, snow-covered cabins, and little girls holding lanterns. Her father used to tell her those drawings would someday belong in real bookstores across America. Now she could barely afford rent. Her phone buzzed suddenly across the table. Unknown number. Claire almost ignored it before answering softly. "Hello, Miss Bennett." Ethan Blackwell's voice instantly tightened every muscle in her body. "I think we need to talk." Claire closed her eyes. "I already told you I am not taking your money. This is not about money." "Then what is it about?" A short silence followed. "Your bookstore." Her heart skipped. "What about it?" "Meet me tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. No, the Blackwell Tower lobby." His tone remained calm. Controlled. "Please." The line went dead before she could answer. The next morning, Claire stood frozen outside the towering glass skyscraper that carried Ethan's last name in giant silver letters across the entrance. Black luxury cars glided silently beneath the covered driveway, while sharply dressed executives rushed through revolving doors holding coffee cups worth more than her lunch budget for a week. Claire looked down at her worn brown boots and nearly turned around. Then she remembered the landlord's final warning about Maple Lane Books. 3 missed payments. Foreclosure papers pending. She swallowed hard and walked inside. The lobby felt like another universe. Marble floors reflected golden chandelier light, while a giant digital stock board wrapped around the walls. People moved fast here. Efficient. Important. Claire suddenly understood why Ethan Blackwell looked so comfortable controlling rooms. This place was built to make everyone else feel small. "Miss Bennett." A woman in a navy suit approached her. "Mr. Blackwell is waiting upstairs." Minutes later, the elevator doors opened directly into Ethan's private office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan beneath gray winter skies. Ethan stood near the glass in a black sweater instead of a suit for once, one hand in his pocket while the other held a tablet. He looked exhausted. "You came," he said quietly. Claire crossed her arms immediately. "Say whatever you need to say." Ethan walked toward his desk and slid a folder across the surface. Claire frowned and opened it. Her stomach dropped instantly. Maple Lane books, financial statements, debt notices, foreclosure risk assessment. "How do you have this?" she whispered. "I had my team investigate after I realized what happened." Claire looked up sharply. "You investigated me?" "I was trying to fix the damage." "By spying on my life?" Ethan exhaled slowly, clearly fighting irritation. "Claire, listen to me carefully. My company is about to close a merger worth almost $2 billion. What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The board thinks the scandal makes me look unstable. Investors are nervous. They want this story controlled immediately." Claire stared at him in disbelief. "So this is about your image?" "Partly." "Unbelievable." She grabbed the folder and turned toward the door. "Wait." Ethan's voice stopped her again. Claire looked back reluctantly. His gray eyes held something unfamiliar this time. Not arrogance. Not coldness. Desperation. "Pretend to be with me," he said quietly. 6 weeks. Public appearances only. After that, the media moves on, your bookstore debt disappears, and both our lives go back to normal. Claire blinked slowly, certain she had heard him wrong. "You want me to fake being your girlfriend?" Ethan nodded once. "There would be rules. Boundaries. A formal contract." Claire let out a stunned laugh. "You really think life works like one of your business deals?" "Usually it does. Not for normal people." Ethan studied her silently for several seconds. "Then maybe you are the first normal thing that has happened to me in years." Claire spent the entire subway ride home replaying Ethan's words in her head. "Pretend to be with me. 6 weeks." The idea sounded ridiculous, cold, completely detached from reality. Yet by the time she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment building in Brooklyn, another thought pressed even harder against her chest. Maple Lane Books was dying. The next morning, she stood inside the bookstore before opening hours, running her fingers across the worn wooden shelves her father had built himself almost 20 years earlier. Dust floated through golden sunlight near the front windows while the old coffee machine hummed softly behind the counter. Everything here carried memories. Her father reading stories during snowstorms. Children sitting cross-legged on the rug during Saturday afternoons. Her mother painting tiny stars on the ceiling before she passed away. Claire swallowed hard when she noticed the foreclosure notice taped beside the office door. Final warning. Mr. Calloway approached quietly from behind her. "The bank called again this morning." Claire nodded, slowly without turning around. "How long do we really have?" "Maybe 3 weeks." The answer hit harder than she expected. 3 weeks until this place disappeared forever. That evening, Claire stood once again inside Blackwell Tower, feeling just as out of place as before. This time, Ethan waited in a private conference room overlooking the city skyline, glowing beneath the dark winter sky. A thick contract rested on the glass table between them beside 2 untouched cups of coffee. Ethan looked up as she entered. "You came back." Claire crossed her arms tightly. "I have conditions." Something almost resembling amusement flickered briefly across his face. "Of course you do." She pointed directly at the contract. "No fake kissing for cameras." Ethan blinked once. "Fine. No moving into your penthouse." "Agreed. And when this ends, you leave me alone." His expression shifted slightly at those words, though he quickly hid it behind his usual calm mask. "Understood." Claire slowly sat down across from him and opened the contract. The legal language made her head ache immediately. Public appearances, charity events, media coordination, relationship image maintenance. She looked up sharply. "You really had lawyers write this already?" "I prepare for problems quickly." That is somehow the least romantic sentence I have ever heard. To her surprise, Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Silence settled between them for a moment while snow drifted outside the massive windows. Then Ethan slid a small velvet box toward her. Claire frowned and opened it carefully. Inside rested a simple silver bracelet. Elegant. Expensive. Understated. "What is this?" she asked softly. "The media expects consistency," Ethan replied. "You wear that at public events. People will recognize it." Claire stared at the bracelet without touching it. "You really planned every detail already." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion visible beneath his composed voice. "Claire, my entire life is built on controlling details." She looked at him carefully then, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive watch and billionaire confidence was someone painfully tired, someone who had not relaxed in years. "That sounds lonely," she said quietly before she could stop herself. Ethan froze slightly at the words. His gray eyes met hers across the table. For one strange second, the room felt smaller, quieter, more honest. Then his phone buzzed sharply, breaking the moment. Ethan glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened immediately. "We need to leave in 20 minutes. Claire frowned. "Leave for where?" "The Harrington Charity Gala. Tonight. You wanted to save your bookstore quickly." He stood and grabbed his coat. "Welcome to my world, Claire." An hour later, Claire stepped out of a black luxury car beneath flashing cameras outside one of the most expensive hotels in Manhattan. Snowflakes drifted beneath bright lights while reporters shouted Ethan's name from behind barricades. Her heart pounded violently as Ethan offered his hand beside the entrance. "Relax," he murmured quietly. "They can smell fear." Claire slipped her trembling hand into his. "Good," she whispered under her breath. "Then maybe they will stay away from me." Ethan looked down at her for half a second before guiding her toward the cameras, unaware that half the room inside already planned to destroy her. The Harrington Charity Gala looked like something pulled from an old Hollywood movie. Crystal chandeliers glowed above a ballroom filled with Manhattan's wealthiest families, while a string quartet played softly near towering arrangements of white roses. Waiters in black tuxedos carried silver trays through the crowd as camera flashes burst near the entrance every few seconds. Claire felt painfully aware of every step she took across the polished marble floor. Her dark green dress fit beautifully, yet she still felt like the same girl who spent mornings unpacking dusty bookshelves in Brooklyn. Beside her, Ethan moved through the crowd effortlessly, shaking hands with politicians, investors, and CEOs like he had rehearsed every smile years ago. "Relax your shoulders," he murmured quietly without looking at her. Claire forced a tight smile. "I am trying not to pass out. If you faint, the tabloids will have a field day." She glanced at him. Comforting. A flicker of amusement crossed his face before another group approached them. Ethan, a glamorous brunette, purred while air-kissing his cheek. "You disappeared after Monaco." Claire instantly noticed the woman's sharp eyes slide toward her. Beautiful. Perfect posture. Expensive diamonds. Dangerous smile. "Claire," Ethan said calmly. "This is Vanessa Hale." Something cold settled in Claire's stomach. Vanessa extended her hand gracefully. "So you are the mystery girl everyone is talking about." Claire shook her hand politely. "I guess so." Vanessa's smile widened slightly. "You must be adjusting quickly. Ethan's world can be overwhelming for outsiders." Claire understood the insult immediately. Before she could answer, a waiter passing nearby suddenly stumbled when another guest backed into him. A tray of champagne glasses tilted dangerously. Several guests gasped and stepped away instantly to avoid the spill. The young waiter froze in panic, his face turning pale. "I am so sorry," he stammered nervously. "I did not mean to." "Do you have any idea how expensive this dress is?" An older woman snapped sharply after champagne splashed across her sleeve. The ballroom fell awkwardly quiet. The waiter looked barely 20 years old. Terrified, Claire saw his trembling hands and reacted before thinking. She stepped forward immediately, grabbed a stack of napkins from another tray, and handed them to the embarrassed woman. "Club soda removes champagne stains fast," Claire said calmly. "My father spilled coffee on my prom dress once. It worked perfectly." A few nearby guests laughed softly, easing the tension instantly. Claire then turned toward the waiter and quietly helped him steady the tray. "Accidents happen," she whispered. "Take a breath." Relief flooded the young man's face. "Thank you." Around them, the uncomfortable atmosphere dissolved almost immediately. Conversations resumed. Music continued, but something strange had shifted. Claire suddenly noticed people smiling at her. Really smiling. Ethan watched silently beside her, his gray eyes unreadable. Vanessa, however, looked irritated. Later that evening, while Ethan spoke with investors near the ballroom stage, Claire slipped away toward A quieter hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snowy Manhattan streets. She exhaled deeply, finally escaping the constant attention. You handled that well. Ethan's voice behind her made her jump slightly. Claire turned toward him. The waiter looked terrified. Ethan leaned against the wall beside her, loosening his tie slightly for the first time all night. Most people in that room would not have noticed him at all. That is sad. That is business. Claire studied him carefully beneath the warm hallway lights. Do you really believe that? Ethan looked out toward the falling snow below. I used to. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Silence settled softly between them. Then Claire noticed something unusual. Ethan's hand trembled slightly near his cufflink before he quickly shoved it into his pocket. His breathing had changed too. Shorter now. Tighter. Ethan, she asked quietly. He straightened immediately. I am fine. But Claire knew he was lying. Claire noticed the change in Ethan immediately. The confident billionaire who could control an entire ballroom with one glance suddenly looked trapped inside his own skin. His breathing turned uneven while the hand in his pocket curled tightly into a fist. Music drifted faintly from the gala behind them. But out here in the quiet hallway, Claire could hear every strained breath he tried to hide. Ethan, she said gently, stepping closer. Look at me. I said I am fine. His voice came sharper this time, colder, like he was angry she noticed anything at all. Claire ignored the wall he tried to build between them. No, you are not. Ethan turned away quickly, jaw tight. Go back inside. Not happening. Snow swirled outside the tall windows behind him while city lights blurred beneath the storm. Claire suddenly remembered the tiny orange prescription bottle she had seen fall halfway out of his coat pocket earlier near the ballroom entrance. Panic attacks. The realization settled quietly inside her chest. Ethan Blackwell was not fearless. He was exhausted from pretending to be. Hey, Claire said softly, lowering her voice even more. Breathe slower. Ethan laughed once under his breath, though there was no humor in it. You think it is that simple? Right now? Yes. He closed his eyes briefly, pressing 2 fingers against his temple. I cannot do this tonight. Claire glanced toward the ballroom doors where wealthy guests still mingled beneath golden lights, completely unaware their untouchable billionaire was unraveling 20 feet away. Without thinking, she gently took his wrist. Ethan stiffened instantly at the contact. Come with me, she whispered. To her surprise, he actually followed. Claire guided him farther down the empty hallway until they reached a quiet service balcony overlooking the snowy streets below. Cold winter air rushed around them the second she pushed the door open. Ethan leaned heavily against the railing, breathing hard. Better? Claire asked softly. Slightly. They stood there in silence for several moments while snowflakes drifted across the city skyline. Then Claire slowly removed her heels and sat cross-legged on the cold balcony floor beside the wall. Ethan frowned down at her. What are you doing? Grounding exercise. That sounds fake. It is not. She patted the floor beside her. Sit. Ethan stared at her like she had completely lost her mind. Claire, I own 3 private jets. Congratulations. She folded her arms stubbornly. Sit down, billionaire. To her shock, Ethan actually did it. Expensive suit and all. He sat beside her against the wall while snow floated through the night air around them. Claire pointed toward the skyline. Tell me 5 things you can see. Ethan looked at her blankly. Seriously? Humor me. He sighed quietly. The bridge. Good. Taxi lights. Keep going. The Empire State Building. His breathing slowly steadied between each answer. Snow on the rooftops. Claire smiled faintly. One more. Ethan looked out across Manhattan for a long moment before answering softer this time. Your ridiculous red scarf. Claire glanced down at the scarf wrapped around her neck and laughed quietly. The sound surprised him enough that he finally looked directly at her again. Really looked at her. Wind tugged strands of blonde hair across her face while snowflakes melted against her lashes. She looked cold, tired, real. Nothing like the polished women usually surrounding him at these events. You are strange, Ethan murmured. Claire smiled slightly. You are the one sitting on a freezing balcony floor in a $5,000 suit. To his own shock, Ethan laughed. An actual laugh. Low and genuine and warm enough to make Claire stare at him in surprise. The tension in his shoulders eased for the first time all night. Down below, Manhattan traffic glowed beneath the falling snow while the gala continued without them. But for several quiet minutes on that balcony, Ethan Blackwell forgot about billion-dollar mergers, cameras, investors, and fake relationships. And Claire forgot this was all supposed to be temporary. Over the next few weeks, something dangerous began happening between Claire Bennett and Ethan Blackwell. It started quietly in the small spaces between their fake appearances. A late-night coffee after interviews. Shared car rides through snow-covered Manhattan streets. Stolen conversations away from cameras during charity events. Somewhere along the way, pretending became harder than either of them expected. Claire noticed the changes first. Ethan stopped checking his phone every 30 seconds when he was around her. He listened when she talked about books. Really listened. One afternoon, she found him sitting alone inside Maple Lane Books after closing hours, still wearing an expensive black overcoat, while awkwardly trying to fix the flickering lamp near the children's reading corner. "You know billionaires can hire electricians, right?" Claire asked from the doorway. Ethan glanced up briefly while tightening the bulb carefully. "And missed the opportunity to impress you." Claire laughed softly before she could stop herself. Ethan looked at her for a second too long after that. Warm light spilled across the old bookstore shelves while snow drifted outside the windows. For the first time in years, Ethan felt calm somewhere that money could not control. Claire felt it too, which terrified her. She started sketching him secretly inside her notebook at night. The way his jaw tightened when stressed. The rare moments he smiled. Unexpectedly. The exhausted look in his eyes whenever he thought nobody noticed. One drawing showed Ethan sitting on the balcony floor beside her beneath falling snow. Claire stared at it for several seconds before quickly shutting the sketchbook closed. This was not supposed to happen. 6 weeks. That was the deal. But the line between fake and real blurred more every day. Then came the Christmas Foundation Gala. Blackwell Tower glowed with gold lights while hundreds of wealthy donors filled the grand ballroom beneath towering crystal chandeliers. A giant orchestra played near the stage as reporters crowded around the entrance. Claire stood beside Ethan in a silver dress while flashes exploded around them. "Smile." Ethan murmured quietly near her ear. "You are crushing my hand." Claire looked down and realized she had been gripping his fingers nervously. "Sorry." Ethan glanced at her softly. "You do not have to be nervous anymore." Before Claire could answer, Vanessa Hale appeared across the ballroom, wearing a sharp white gown and a smile that immediately made Claire uneasy. "Ethan," Vanessa purred while approaching them with champagne in hand. "The board is waiting for your speech." Ethan's expression cooled instantly. "Then I should not keep them waiting." He looked toward Claire before leaving. "I will be back in 5 minutes." Claire nodded, watching him disappear toward the stage while donors applauded his arrival. The giant LED screens behind the ballroom lit up with the Blackwell Capital logo. Ethan adjusted the microphone calmly, looking every inch the untouchable billionaire CEO again. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began smoothly. Claire smiled faintly despite herself. Then suddenly the screens behind Ethan flickered. The ballroom lights dimmed strangely. Confused murmurs spread across the crowd. Ethan turned sharply toward the screens just as grainy video footage suddenly filled the ballroom. A rooftop casino. Poker tables. Whiskey glasses. Claire's blood ran cold instantly. Mason Reed's voice echoed loudly through the speakers. 1 month. Pick any woman in this city and make her fall for you. Then Ethan's voice followed. Calm. Cold. Arrogant. Easy. The ballroom fell completely silent. Claire stopped breathing. On screen, Ethan slipped the silver poker chip into his pocket while laughter erupted around the poker table. "And what happens if you lose?" someone asked. Ethan smirked faintly on the screen. "I do not lose." Claire felt like the floor disappeared beneath her. Around her, whispers exploded instantly through the ballroom. She slowly looked toward the real Ethan standing frozen on stage, horror finally cracking through his carefully controlled expression. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Claire's chest tightened painfully as every memory replayed in her head. The contract, the cameras, the fake relationship, the balcony, the bookstore. None of it suddenly felt real anymore. Vanessa stepped quietly beside Claire with satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "Looks like you were part of the game after all." Claire could barely hear her. Her fingers trembled as she slowly reached into her purse and pulled out the silver bracelet Ethan had given her the night of the contract. Then, with tears burning in her eyes, Claire removed it from her wrist and walked toward the ballroom exit while the entire room watched Ethan Blackwell lose the only thing he never meant to risk. Claire did not remember leaving the ballroom. One second she was standing beneath crystal chandeliers while Ethan's voice echoed through hidden speakers, and the next she was outside in the freezing Manhattan night with snow melting against her cheeks like cold tears. Reporters shouted questions from behind barricades as black cars crowded the hotel entrance. Claire, did you know about the bet? Was the relationship fake? Did Ethan Blackwell use you? She kept walking. Her chest hurt too much to answer anything. Behind her, ballroom doors burst open. Claire, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos immediately. She stopped for half a second before turning slowly toward him. Snow landed in his dark hair, while camera flashes exploded around them. For the first time since meeting him, Ethan Blackwell looked completely shattered. Please let me explain, he said breathlessly. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Explain what? Exactly. Her voice trembled despite her effort to stay calm. That I was a joke to you? A challenge? No. Ethan stepped closer carefully. It started that way, but it changed. Claire laughed softly through tears. You know what hurts the most? She shook her head slowly. I actually believed you were different when nobody else did. Ethan's jaw tightened painfully. Claire, do not. She backed away instantly. Do not say my name like you still deserve to. The words hit him harder than anything else that night. Around them, Manhattan traffic blurred beneath falling snow while reporters watched the scene unfold like vultures waiting for another headline. Ethan lowered his voice desperately. I never meant to hurt you. Claire looked at him for several long seconds before whispering the one thing he feared most. That is the problem, Ethan. You never meant to care either. Then she turned and disappeared into the snowy crowd before he could stop her again. The next 48 hours became a disaster. Every news station replayed the poker video beside photos of Claire leaving the gala in tears. Blackwell Capital stock dropped 6% overnight. Investors demanded answers. The board blamed Ethan completely. Yet none of it mattered to him anymore. Ethan sat alone inside his penthouse office long after midnight, staring at the silver bracelet Claire left behind on his desk. The city skyline glowed beyond the windows, but for once the view felt empty. Mason Reed entered quietly holding a tablet. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Ethan did not look up. Cancel it. Mason blinked. You are kidding. No, Ethan, the merger. I do not care about the merger. Silence filled the room. Mason slowly set the tablet down. You really fell for her. Ethan rubbed a tired hand across his face. I think I did long before I realized it. Across Brooklyn, Claire sat alone inside Maple Lane Books after closing hours. Only one lamp glowed near the register while snowstorm winds rattled softly outside. She stared blankly at the sketchbook lying open beside her. Every page somehow contained Ethan now. His smile on the balcony. His tired eyes in the bookstore. The way he looked at her when he forgot to hide who he really was. Claire quickly shut the sketchbook closed, angry at herself for still caring. Then suddenly the lights flickered overhead. Claire frowned. A strange smell drifted faintly through the bookstore. Smoke. Her eyes widened instantly. No. She jumped to her feet, just as a loud crack echoed somewhere near the storage room in the back. Panic surged through her chest. Within seconds, thin gray smoke began curling beneath the doorway while alarms screamed through the silent bookstore. Claire grabbed her sketchbook instinctively and rushed toward the front door, coughing as smoke thickened around the shelves. Then she froze. The sketchbook slipped from her hands onto the floor near the spreading smoke. Her father's drawings. Her memories. Everything she loved. Before Claire could reach it again, the bookstore doors suddenly burst open through the smoke-filled entrance. Ethan Blackwell stormed inside without hesitation. Claire, get out now. Ethan's voice cut through the smoke-filled bookstore as alarms screamed overhead. Thick gray smoke curled between the shelves while sparks crackled somewhere near the back storage room. Claire stood frozen beside the fallen sketchbook on the floor, panic and heartbreak crashing together inside her chest. My sketchbook! Forget the sketchbook! Ethan shouted, coughing as he pushed farther through the smoke toward her. But Claire could not move. That notebook held years of memories. Her father's handwritten notes in the margins. The drawings she made during lonely nights after losing him. And somehow, every recent page now carried Ethan's face too. Flames flickered suddenly near the back wall, throwing orange light across the shelves. Ethan saw the fear in Claire's eyes and understood instantly. Without another word, He pulled his coat over his mouth and rushed directly toward the sketchbook lying dangerously close to the smoke. "Ethan, no," Claire cried, reaching toward him instinctively. He grabbed the notebook just as another loud crack echoed overhead. Then Ethan turned immediately and ran back toward her through the haze. The second he reached Claire, he pulled her tightly against his chest and guided her toward the exit. Cold winter air slammed into them as they stumbled outside onto the snowy sidewalk together. Fire trucks arrived moments later while red lights reflected across the falling snow. Claire stood trembling beneath the streetlights, clutching the sketchbook tightly against her chest while firefighters rushed past them toward the burning bookstore. Tears blurred her vision. "You could have gotten hurt," she whispered shakily. Ethan looked at her like nothing else around them mattered. "So could you." For several seconds, neither of them moved. Snow landed softly in Ethan's dark hair while smoke drifted behind them into the freezing night sky. Then Claire slowly looked down at the sketchbook in her arms. Her fingers shook as she opened it carefully. The pages survived. Every drawing. Every memory. Including the sketch of Ethan laughing beside her on the balcony beneath falling snow. Ethan noticed it immediately. His expression softened completely. Claire closed the notebook quickly, embarrassed. "I did not mean for you to see that. I am glad I did." His voice was quiet now. Honest. The kind of honesty she had waited too long to hear. Ethan took a slow step closer. "Claire, the bet was real." Pain flickered across her face instantly. "Do not. Please let me finish." Snow swirled around them, while distant sirens echoed through Brooklyn streets. Ethan looked more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "The bet happened before I knew you existed. Before I knew you would walk into my life carrying books in your arms and somehow make me feel human again." Claire's eyes filled slowly with tears. Ethan exhaled shakily before continuing. "Everything after that was real. Every conversation. Every late-night coffee. Every moment in that bookstore." He looked down briefly at the sketchbook in her hands. "You were the first person who ever stayed when I had nothing useful to offer except myself." Claire swallowed hard. "You hurt me, Ethan. I know." His voice cracked slightly for the first time. "And if I could erase that night at the poker table, I would trade every dollar I have to do it." Silence settled between them, while snow covered the sidewalk around their feet. Then Ethan slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the silver poker chip from the casino night. The same one that started everything. Without hesitation, he dropped it directly into a nearby pile of melting snow. "No more bets," he said quietly. Claire stared at him, emotions colliding painfully inside her chest. Then, slowly, she stepped closer and touched the front of his coat with trembling fingers. "You really came back for me." Ethan looked at her softly. "Claire, I never stopped." Months later, Maple Lane Books reopened beneath warm golden lights and freshly painted windows. Children laughed between the shelves while snow drifted peacefully outside. A new wooden sign above the entrance read, "Bennett and Blackwell Stories." Claire stood near the reading corner wearing her familiar red scarf while Ethan adjusted crooked Christmas lights beside the front counter. "You are terrible at decorating," Claire teased softly. Ethan glanced over at her with the same rare smile she once sketched in secret. "And yet you still kept me." Claire laughed quietly just before Ethan walked toward her and slipped a small velvet box into her hand. Inside rested a ring beside the slightly melted silver poker chip. Claire looked up at him in surprise as Ethan gently took both her hands. "I spent my whole life trying to win everything," he whispered. "Then you taught me some things are only real when you stop treating them like a game." Tears filled Claire's eyes again as Ethan rested his forehead softly against hers beneath the warm bookstore lights. "So this time," he murmured, "I am not asking you to pretend."